the staff of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com. Join WVUA 23's Jenn Chapman for an in-depth analysis of the Crimson Tide and SEC football. This is Tide Sports TV.
Welcome into Tide Sports TV, a conjunction between WVUA 23 News and the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com. We're at Bob's Victory Grill in Midtown. First, we kick things off with the big picture brought to you by the Soup Store. Joining me from the Tuscaloosa News is Cecil Hurt. Cecil, will begin with the Heisman Trophy. Derrick Henry winning. What does that mean for Alabama? Well,
it's certainly nice for Alabama to have a second Heisman Trophy in their trophy case, and they'll certainly use it in recruiting. And it's a great honor and a lot of positive publicity on the Heisman show, and I think particularly with the way Derrick handled himself.
Speaking of the way Derrick handled himself, everybody is talking about his speech, and I haven't heard a critical point yet about his speech. What did you think about his speech and how it differed from others?
Yeah, I thought he was honest and direct. It didn't sound like something that had been written for him and handed to him to read, which was refreshing. He just thanked a lot of people because he's a humble kid and wanted to thank those people. Remembered just about everybody, I think, which was good. And I think he came across as genuine. I think that's the reason that people are reacting to it the way that they have.
And I personally loved at the end when he addressed the kids, because even him growing up, he said he looked at some of these guys. These are guys he's modeled after. He wants to have kids look up after him. What did you think, though, about his talk about Coach Burns and the impact that Coach Burns has had on him and players you've seen before that?
Well, it's great to see the assistant coach get the recognition, and Coach Burns certainly deserves it. He's done a great job for Nick Saban. He's had a outstanding string of running backs at Alabama, not just Mark and Derrick, but all the guys, TJ from Glenn Coffey on, TJ and Eddie Lacy and Kenyon Drake and some of the guys who weren't starters but have been good backs. So it was great to see him get some positive recognition.
And from a recruiting standpoint, this bodes very well to see the success with 5 in the last 7 years having an Alabama player as a finalist.
Sure, yeah, and some of that is connected with the team's success. It all sort of interlaces with itself. The better team you have, the better guys you can recruit. Better guys you can recruit, the more guys you're going to have at the Heisman. The more guys that you have at the Heisman, the better you're going to recruit.
All right, let's move on to the big game that's coming up, Alabama, Michigan State. We didn't get to talk to you about it last week. So what are your opinions on this game?
Well, it's still early. We've still got over 2 weeks to sort of see what Michigan State looks like when they get to Dallas for their bowl prep. Obviously it's a tough matchup, a big physical Big Ten team. That might be more conducive to Alabama's style of play, but we'll just have to see. And they'll be well coached. A lot of seniors, a lot of guys that have matured. Very upperclassman dominated lineup and a great coach in Mark D'Antonio. So I think it's a good matchup.
And we saw Michigan State's reaction when they found out it was Alabama. A little bit of shock from them. But what would it take for Sparty to beat Alabama?
Well, it's going to take what it takes in every game. If Alabama turns the ball over, if they aren't efficient on offense, if Jake Coker can't make some things happen, he doesn't have to carry the team in the downfield passing game, but you need to make some things happen. If whichever team wins the special teams will have a big advantage. If Connor Cook has a big game for Michigan State, that certainly helped their cause.
All right, let's go to Clemson, Oklahoma. Who do you have winning this one and why?
I think it'll be a close game. I think that it'll be a high-scoring game. If I had to pick, I'd probably pick Clemson, but I think Deshaun Watson is. I guess they're both well-regarded quarterbacks. I think Deshaun Watson's a kid that really carries the Clemson offense, can do a lot of things. So it's a toss-up, but if I had to pick, I'd pick Clemson.
And obviously, Alabama can't look past Michigan State, but as a fan, who should they be rooting for in the Clemson-Oklahoma game?
Well, like I say, I think Clemson-Oklahoma is a toss-up, so I think you're going to get about the same kind of matchup with either one. So you can't really worry about that. You get to the national championship game, you play who they put in front of you.
All right, switching gears a little, we're going to go to Alabama basketball. You primarily cover that for the Tuscaloosa News. Are you surprised at how well Alabama has already done this season? 6-2 to start.
Well, when you consider that it's against the number 19 strength of schedule in the country, that's a good start. They've won close games. They've been poised at the end of games. They've made some critical plays. They're not a very deep roster. They're not a super talented roster. So they're really getting the most out of what they have. So yeah, they're probably a little ahead of where I would have picked them, but at the same time, that's what good coaching and players who stick together, that's what can happen.
You led into the next question. Is this an Avery Johnson thing? Is he infusing belief in his players that they can do this?
Well, the players have talked about that, and yeah, when they're prepared for situations, when things aren't new to them, when they're not looking at things that they haven't dealt with in practice, it's easier for them. And the more success you have at that, the more confidence you're going to have. But I think it all goes back to coaching.
Now, the last 4 wins have come on the road. They'll return home this week against Winthrop. What does it say that a team is getting it done on the road, 2 of those wins against ranked opponents?
Well, it's, again, back to the same thing that we just talked about. It's confidence. It's people need to be aware that this isn't some different roster than they had in the preseason. It's not like, they found a couple of first-round NBA draft picks. These are the same guys that everybody's been familiar with. They're just playing with confidence, playing good defense, which keeps games close, making some critical shots at some big times, and finding a way to win. They've had a couple of losses where they've been beaten pretty badly. So it's not like, hey, this is a team that we didn't know anything about, and all of a sudden these new guys are breaking out. It's not, and it's going to affect them to lose Dazon Ingram. It's going to be a long season. They're not going to sneak up on people, and it's still a limited roster in a lot of ways. But it's certainly good to see poise and coaching and that sort of thing as part of the mix.
Now, Dazon Ingram, Mr. Basketball for Alabama last year in high school, the freshman that everyone was looking to, obviously contributing early, now out for the season. How does this impact the rest of the team?
Well, it changes Justin Coleman's role, the amount of minutes that he'll get. Changes Retton's role to some extent. He has to play some point guard. Dazon was the leading rebounder on the team when he went out. They responded well to that against Clemson, rebounded the ball well, did a good job on the offensive glass, but they'll have to keep doing that. And, he's a guy that was going to continue to play 30, 35 productive minutes for him, so you've just got to find that both from your starters having a little bit of an extended role and on the bench.
Now, as you said, they have to keep doing that. It's only December. The season is long.
Right. Oh, yeah.
What are going to be the keys to this team not wearing off the excitement and the play that they're currently doing?
Well, they're going to have to pace themselves. They're not a deep bench, certainly not anymore without Dazon, so they're going to have to be aware of wanting to practice hard, wanting to play hard, but also staying fresh. They're going to have to continue to shoot the ball well, to continue to improve on some things offensively. They've got some guys who have a lot of upside, guys like Dante Hall, who's just developing, and he needs to develop pretty quickly. So all those things are going to factor into it.
And last question, you've covered Alabama for quite some time, plenty of coaches. What impresses you the most about Coach Avery Johnson?
Well, he's positive. He teaches a positive message. He's realistic about his team. He doesn't make excuses when they don't win. He'll explain to you they didn't do this offensively, they didn't do that defensively. But the main thing is he tries to keep things positive.
Awesome. All right, that's all the time we have right now for the big picture. Don't worry, Cecil will be back later in the show to answer your questions that you posted on the Tidesports.com message board. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Tide Sports TV. We are live at Bob's Victory Grill in Midtown. Now it's time to go inside the Tide, brought to you by Ziegler Meats. Joining me from the Tuscaloosa News is Aaron Suttles. Aaron, we're going to start with Alabama football. Jeremy Pruitt will now, will now replace Kirby Smart as DC. What does this mean for the Tide?
Well, the biggest thing, everyone notices the on-the-field stuff, and that's well and good, but when Alabama lost Kirby Smart, they lost one of their best recruiters on staff. Bringing in Jeremy Pruitt automatically equals that out, because Jeremy Pruitt is a great recruiter, especially in the state of Georgia, which was kind of Kirby's home territory. So they won't lose that much, and maybe can keep equal footing there with recruiting. And then on the field, Jeremy Pruitt won a national championship with Florida State, improved Georgia's defense last year, or this year rather, in the secondary. So I think it's a pretty good hire considering, what Alabama was losing. Not only Kirby's experience in the defense, 9 years total, 8 as the defensive coordinator, but as a recruiter, and then to not be able to lose that much is a huge, huge boon for Alabama.
And with Kirby going to Georgia as their new head coach, he's still here through the playoffs. So how strange is it or wild is it that there's actually 2 DCs basically in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, sharing the same office. That's got to be awkward. Jeremy right now is focused on recruiting. Kirby will now come back to Tuscaloosa. He's been in Athens. He's been recruiting for Georgia Bulldogs and getting that 2016 class together. Now Kirby transitions, comes back. Practice starts on Wednesday. He'll be back in Tuscaloosa. And Jeremy will focus on recruiting for Alabama for 2016. So, and although Jeremy's not allowed to be an on-the-field coach, you can bet he will sneak a peek and lend an extra set of eyes at Michigan State as they get ready for the college football playoff and the Cotton Bowl.
All right, another coach that was up in the air. Would he be going with Kirby Smart? Will he be staying? It became official this week that Scott Cochran will be staying. Probably the most recognizable coach outside of Coach Saban, and also the most well-known strength and conditioning coach in the country. Who else gets a shout-out at the Heisman? But Scott Cochran. So what did you think about Alabama getting to retain him and not going with Kirby to Georgia?
Well, it means they don't have to redo the scoreboard. Fourth quarter guy, they still got him raising.
And they're using them at the basketball games too. I thought that yesterday. I was like, oh, this could be bad.
And there was real consideration that Kirby wanted him to go to Georgia because, listen, you mentioned it. There are not a ton of programs in the country where people know who the strength and conditioning coach is. Scott Cochran is recognizable not only in Tuscaloosa but in the state of Alabama. You go, yeah, and people automatically know what you're talking about. And that's sort of the hype around it, but there's a realness to it. And you mentioned it. How many strength and conditioning coaches get a shout-out at the Heisman? And it wasn't like a 5-second thing. Derrick Henry went on and on about what Scott Cochran had done for him as a player. So it was huge keeping him in Alabama. The players really buy into him. And people are kind of losing their mind a little bit. Is it crazy to pay a strength and conditioning coach $500,000? That strength and conditioning coach spends more time with a football player than their position coach, than their head coach. He sees them every day. He knows what's going on in their personal life. He knows how to motivate them in the weight room. So it was huge keeping him in.
And no play on words with this, but they make gains in the off season.
Yeah.
See what I did there? But that's with the strength and conditioning coach, and that's who, Coach Saban or any head coach in the country has to trust somebody so much with those players to get them bigger, faster, stronger, or in some cases, as Coach Saban requested last year, some of them he wanted smaller so they would be faster. And obviously Coach Cochran's been able to make those adjustments because we hear week in and week out from other coaches how physical Alabama is and how in shape they are. And there's not a front 7, there's a front 30.
Right. Well, no bigger example. You take a look at Tim Williams, the guy that came in this season, prior to the spring, was 230 pounds. He's playing at 260 right now. He's second on the team in sacks at 9.5. The transition he made in his body to put on the weight, to add the strength, and keep the speed has really helped the Alabama defense on the outside getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks.
So yeah to Alabama for keeping Scott Cochran. All right, to Derrick Henry, you got to go to New York for the Heisman.
Yeah.
What was that experience like, and just tell us about it.
Yeah, it was, you consider the history and the tradition and pageantry of Alabama football. To think that I got to cover, one of the 2 Heisman winners is pretty cool, and it's something I'll remember forever. And being up there with in the great city of New York, and you don't really think of college football when you think of New York, but it had this atmosphere, at least around the Heisman, that was pretty cool. And the way Derek and Deshaun Watson and Christian McCaffrey, the way they handled it, I thought it was pretty cool.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Derek. I'm not afraid to admit this. I totally teared up when he made his speech because when we interview him week in and week out, I remember specifically middle of the season, I asked him if he's ever going to smile at us because he was so serious. And then to see him this last week just be happy and smiling, and it was like his hard work has paid off, and people are noticing the work that he's done and how he's helped Alabama. His comments were amazing, and to see him open up like that and be that genuine is exactly what we need in athletes and in role models, especially to kids. And I loved that part of his speech.
Yeah, I wrote this in the story in Sunday's paper that it's easier to tackle Derrick Henry than it is to get him to reveal something about himself. He's just not a guy that's going to share a lot about his personal life or about really what makes him tick. He's all about business. He's so focused. He doesn't have time for that nonsense that we ask on a daily basis. So to see him in that, I think it's really going to help him in his next step if he goes to the NFL whenever he does, because you have to talk to the media there. You have to make yourself available. So it was a great, skill that he learned in dealing with a ton of questions, some good, some were goofy. He got to ask about the dab and who killed it, and I thought he just handled it himself really well, and he opened himself up. And when he finally opened himself up, he endeared himself to the fans to a level that we hadn't seen before.
It's awesome. And this isn't really on my list, but I thought I noticed Coach Saban tear up. We heard him get a little emotional when he talked about Kirby Smart. Is he getting soft on us?
I think it's the grandchild. It's making him soft in his older age.
Well, I kind of like it. All right. One more question about Alabama football. What does Alabama need to improve upon as it prepares for Michigan State?
It's the self-inflicted errors, what they've struggled with all year. Don't turn the football over. Don't jump off sides. Don't commit holding. The discipline penalties that they've struggled with at times, if they can limit that and they can hold on to the football, they've proven down the last fourth of the season, the way that Lane Kiffin called that offense to go along with the defense that they had, they're really tough to beat. They dominate time of possession. They hold on to the football. They pound you with number 2, Derrick Henry. If they hold on to the football, don't commit a lot of turnovers, they don't beat themselves, they're really difficult to beat.
So is that what Michigan State should be worried about the most? Is time of possession?
Yeah, you got to control Derrick Henry, and they're going to load the box, and they're going to make it incumbent upon Jake Coker to make some plays on the outside. Because, but that being said, Alabama's not afraid. If it takes us rushing Derrick Henry 45 times to beat you, we'll do it. Derrick Henry's had 90 carries in the last 2 games.
Or even as the SEC championship kind of played out, Jake Coker can run it as well.
Right.
And I think that caught Florida off guard, and that might need to come back into the mix a little more.
Just
And
something
Jake
different,
Coker's not afraid to run it either.
And he's a big guy. He can take a hit.
Sorry for hitting you just now. All right, that's all the time we have for Inside the Tide, but when we come back, Cecil Hurt will be up here joining us for the questions that you asked us on the TideSports.com message board. Stay with us. Welcome back to Tide Sports TV. It's now time to answer your questions that you posted on the TideSports.com message board or that you tweeted at us at Tide Sports TV. The first question, A.J. McCarron. Looks like he'll be starting with the Bengals. He got his first real NFL action last weekend when he was called off the bench after Andy Dalton got injured. Can he be a viable NFL starting quarterback? Who wants to take this one first?
Well, let's Cecil handle this one.
You can start with his comments about Tom Brady.
I think, first of all, I don't think A.J. was comparing himself to Tom Brady. He was just saying that every quarterback, whether it's Tom Brady, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, every quarterback has to be in a backup situation at some point in their career, unless they were a first-round draft choice who stepped right in and took over like Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota are doing this year. But even those guys, at some point in their career, they were a backup. So I think that's all A.J. was saying. I don't think he was saying I'm as good as Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, any of those guys. It's just that most quarterbacks start off and do an apprenticeship, and then they come in, and when their time comes, they have to be ready. So that's all I think A.J. was saying. Can he be successful? Sure. I think A.J.'s got as much ability as some of the guys who are starting in the NFL and winning games.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for A.J. is that he's not going to be asked to do a lot because he's got a pretty talented team around him, right? A.J. Green's a pretty nice weapon to have if you're a quarterback, and they got one of the most productive tight ends in the NFL, so it's not like he's being asked to go to the doormat of the NFL and lead them. He's basically keeping the seat warm right now until they figure out what's going on with Andy Dalton. But as he showed you, his first NFL pass went for a long touchdown. So he also had 2 interceptions. But, the skill is there, and I think it's important for him that there's not going to be a ton of pressure that everything's on you to go win us the game.
All right, the second question. The All-American Awards came out. Alabama had a number of players recognized for their play this season. Did anyone get overlooked and should have been honored?
I don't know that anybody got overlooked. You can't always get guys as high as you want. I think Jaron Reed, a lot of people thought was a first-team All-SEC performer and probably didn't get quite the appreciation that he deserved. But I think for the most part, I think it's hard to argue where the guys were placed, what awards they won. Certainly Derek won all the major awards that you can win. Reggie Ragland's been a first-team All-American. Ashawn's gotten a lot of credit for the year that he had. So it is tougher. Aaron referenced one other one. When you start getting into freshman teams and freshman All-SEC teams, some guys play a lot because their team's not very good, so they play a lot. Some guys, like Alabama's players, are on a really good team, and freshmen don't always play a lot, even though they're very good players. Deron Payne being one example.
I agree with Cecil. I don't like the term overlook because there's certainly a lot of worthy candidates across the country, but you look at how Alabama grades their defensive linemen, and I would go with Jaron Reed. He was the most consistent, probably, defensive lineman they had all year. At times was very dominant, but he plays a position where you're not going to get a ton of stats, right? Most of the stuff that you do is not really on a stat sheet, but the people, you look at the players of the week, the coaches' players of the week every week, and Jaron was on there most times. So he was certainly deserving, but so were a lot of players. And
that also means a lot to him that his coaches are naming him a player of the week as well.
The way they rotate on that defensive line, it's just tough. You can make a case for Ashawn, and Ashawn's had some spectacular highlights. You can make a case for Jaron. You can make a case for Jonathan Allen. Guy who's got the ridiculous stats is actually Tim Williams, because he plays mainly on third downs. But it takes all those guys doing their job, and sometimes you don't accumulate big stats, but they've got a really good unit. I think if there was any kind of unit award, they certainly would have won that.
All right, so we're moving on to Retin Obasahan. He won SEC Player of the Week for basketball. Can he continue to be an offensive force, and who else needs to step up? Cecil, we'll let you start with that.
Yeah, they all need to step up in one way or another. Retin can continue to be a force, but Retin can average 23 points a game if the other guys aren't all doing their job. Even in the second half of the Clemson game, Clemson started shading the guy over, started defending him more aggressively. What has to happen when that happens is that it opens up opportunities for other guys, and they've got to score.
Yeah, I think Cecil nailed it. When they're favoring one side, kick it to the weak side and get an open shot. And Shannon Hale certainly got the talent to make other teams pay for shifting coverage in Retin's way. But they all need to step up. This is a limited roster this year, and they're maximizing what they have. But they're all going to need, whether it's in shifts, game by game, or just collectively, they're all going to have to step up.
And Retin, who's from Belgium, Dabo Sweeney said the other day he looks like a football player, and Retin confirmed to everyone today he really doesn't even know football, and so he would never play. And actually, he wasn't even confused about why there's two names for safety, with defensive back and safety.
He would make a great safety, wouldn't he?
That's what they picked for him. Yeah. All right, final question. This is a fun one. What do you want for Christmas? Aaron?
I want all my flights to be on time to Dallas, going and coming back from.
All right, that's kind of boring.
I'm a boring person.
Cecil?
I hadn't really thought about it. I just you reach an age, Jen, where you've got all the material stuff.
Oh, I like that answer. But you have two little ones in the audience looking at you right now.
They
have
not reached that age.
They're like, we'll take his gifts, whatever he wants. We'll
absolutely,
take it.
Absolutely. They could give you a long list, but for me, I just want it to be a time where everybody's with their family and together and peaceful and those kind of happy thoughts for the world.
That's awesome. And same, I just want to actually be with my family. I'm from Virginia, so I'm going home for Christmas, which doesn't usually happen. And there's 14 kids in my family on the 10th, and we have 26 nieces and nephews, and almost everyone is going to be there. So to me, that's pretty awesome. Well, we wish you and your family a Merry Christmas. Thanks for joining us for Tide Sports TV. We'll see you again soon.